welcome to this session. My name is Matt Dunwell, and I'm really just holding the floor briefly for Jairo and introducing Jairo Restrepo to you. I've known Jairo for about 7 or 8 years, and he is a strong voice for those who fight for diverse cropping systems and affordable, healthy diets. Originally from Colombia and now living back in Colombia, he has a beautiful demonstration farm called Pachita, from which he grows and teaches. He studied at Brazil, and he worked in the pesticide industry, and where he was perfecting pesticides that had no aroma. And whilst he was doing that, he had an epiphany and dedicated his life to natural farming, to organic farming, and biofertilizers and building system health. In other words, he basically turned his back on the industrial agricultural system. But what's interesting with Jairo is he comes from a scientific training of plant biochemistry, and he's used this to devise practical systems that small farmers can use to build fertility on their land. So he's less interested in teaching recipes, but insistent that farmers from every background understand the theory behind his thinking, so they can develop their own approach that is appropriate to their local situation. So this is building on the quiet revolution going on across India, Africa, and South America, a deep understanding of system health through diverse cropping, photosynthesis as a driver for regeneration, and microbiology and the use of biofertilizers to build system health. And Jairo has played a really critical role in South America in this respect. And I'll finish soon, but I wanted to just, he's a champion of small farmers, and Jairo is happiest when he's up to about here in cow manure in a bucket. And I think it's that connection with small growers that really inspires him. He's not particularly championed by academic institutions or serenaded by politicians, recognized by the corporate machine. He has created a useless ideology for those powers, because what he teaches can't be branded or marketed or profited from. I'm really, really pleased that he's here. I love the Oxford Real Farming Conference. I'm missing the organic beer. But I just wanted to put a shout out to the organizers and the tech team behind this conference. It is pretty amazing. So I just wanted to put that out. And the Real Farming Conference brings together the best minds, and it also builds collaboration. And so I'm really, really honored and pleased to introduce Jairo Restrepo to you. Over to you, Jairo.
Muchas gracias por la.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation, to this conference, and for the organizers for the risks that they might face and for daring to invite me based on all of the different participants that we're seeing here. We're seeing that many participants are taking place in this conference. Just to give a small explanation or to broaden the title of such. The title of this conference really talks about 3 topics: the ideal state of being, the impact of industrial agriculture on our soils, diet, and souls. To begin with, the ideal state of being. With this, what I'm referring to is that at no time have I ever wanted to be somebody at the service of the state. I've never wanted to be an ideal. You need a daily exercising of being a rebel here, of rebellion. And because I believe that the notion of state has been overcome in the sense that the practice has shown that the authoritarian state takes away your dreams and doesn't respond to the interests of those who were at some time offered trust to be our political representatives. This incredulity is based and more than proven on all of the acts of corruption, violation of rights and crimes, and anti-democratic and demagogic acts against the large majorities, such as the peasants, who live with the dream of a state that is committed to society. To talk about this agrarian topic, there is a lot to discuss on an international and national level. In the local case, Colombia is a good example of the dehumanizing and corrupt approach that we are seeing on the land and that can easily be extrapolated to other countries in the region. And this can also be extrapolated to other continents within the topics that we can discuss here in Colombia. We have other topics which are no less important, and among those we have displacement as a victim of violence, with more than 7 million people being displaced from rural areas, mainly going to the large cities and large urban centers. Another situation worth highlighting here in Colombia in the agricultural area are the crimes and social massacres. More than 3,000 murders have been reported officially. We've seen disappearances. More than 85,000 people have disappeared without having any clue of where they are. We've seen human rights being violated, torture, threats. We've seen more than 320 leaders being affected and being murdered. With the large landowners, this is something that we're seeing growing the most in Colombia. Less than 1% of the population, the wealthiest population in Colombia, is the owner of 50% of the agricultural land in the country. Less than 1% of the wealthiest possesses this amount. So in the agricultural sphere, we also have the issue of deforestation. More than 250,000 square hectares of land are destroyed every year to satisfy the state. And lastly, the situation that we're facing here, which is quite difficult, is the situation of gender equality. Women in rural areas do not have full recognition by the state. They are the economy which is not being visibilized. They are an important part of the wealth that's being created in the rural areas. More than 5 million women live in rural areas without their economic support being recognized officially. By contrast to this situation, we also have natural wealth here in Colombia, characterized by our biodiversity, flora, fauna. We have precious minerals, water, forests, and so the country could really be self-sufficient, and it could also determine itself what it needs to survive in a dignified way, without the need for asking for loans or for using up the land for example, for the benefit of the IMF or the World Bank. The population, and particularly that of the rural areas, is a working population. It's a humble and honest population. It's a unified and happy population community. We have the hope of continuing with this chant of hope in the lands where they are growing their products, when violence provoked by the state and other sectors can be eradicated fully from their lands. This would be the first part of the title of our conference. And the second title within this conference relates to the impact of industrial agriculture, above all on the soil. The impact of industrial agriculture can be divided into the environmental and biological and social impacts, or economic or cultural impacts, and even political impacts of the decisions. But in this case, I'm going to make an emphasis on the technological impact, which is important, and that is on the soil. With the involvement of technology in industrial agriculture on our soil, it has had a huge effect on our soil. And the three most significant effects can be seen within three types of erosion. We have the physical erosion, the chemical erosion of the soil, and lastly, the biological erosion of the soil. The physical erosion with agro-industrial practices, mainly through the mechanization of the land. In some cases, in Latin America, we've seen losses of up to 20 tons of fertile land per hectare per year, 20 tons. We're talking about the loss of 2 to 8 kilos of land per square meter. This is a very serious situation. And we can also talk about the chemical erosion. This is something that we don't see much in the media. And this has to do with the chemicals that are being used on the soil. And this has an effect on the rare soil elements which are found in very small amounts, which are so necessary for health and for the plants, and are also so necessary for humanity, for humankind, just as any other element is. But the worst thing about this is that these tiny elements are being sold now. So this is where we see the manipulation of the nutrition of the soil. These are being sold in capsules. And this impact of this erosion, and another one which I'm going to talk about now, is the biological erosion. And this is the simplification of each and every one of the eco-biological relationships, both vertical and horizontal, which are established so that the soil can evolve in a healthy way with different crops that we want to plant. All of the coverage of the soil and the relationships with the plants and the land, these aren't just vertical relationships, these aren't just to do with nutrition, as agro-industry would want, but these are actually also physically related to all of the different interconnections, the endosymbiotic of relationships of macrobiotics, which are established in a horizontal way, precisely to do with the horizontal surface of the land. To extend this idea a bit more, we're always used to seeing the land in a vertical way and in terms of planting something there, but in the georevolution and in the geology of the soil, the most important factor are the horizontal relationships, in fact. It's the horizontal relationships which are determined first so that the plants can begin to get deeper into the soil. And this is something that we will never be able to do with industrial agriculture. Without the constant action of microbiology on the soil, it's impossible to get, if we don't have this functioning constantly, this microbiology functioning constantly, we can't have a healthy agriculture. For example, the three kinds of erosion I mentioned earlier, physical, chemical, and biological, we can talk about the involvement of technology and the GM crops, for example, mainly soya and corn and other monocultures, which are also responsible and that have been destroying the forests, for example, palm oil, sugarcane, cork, eucalyptus, pine, extensive livestock farming, and the industrial farming of animals. These are all activities which most host the worst impacts on the soil and the worst impacts on the rural population and the health of those consuming the products produced. And the worst impacts are seen in the cities, because the cities are full of people who don't know what they're eating. They're completely alienated from the situation and the reality of what's going on. We don't need more research, and we don't need to have the same old arguments going over the same academic discourse, talking about global warming. For me, we're far beyond that. What we need now is more action. We need more social commitment. We need the United Nations and other corrupt organizations such as the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization, which is also corrupt, which is at the service of the health industry. We need more work from these areas to show more commitment. And agro-industry and the pharmaceutical areas have their own foundations to give a different image of themselves. One very clear example of that false philanthropy has been developed recently in Africa by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And at the moment, right now, looking over the last 14 years of pretentious investments in Africa, they've done this over the last 14 years with more than $1 billion. The only thing they've managed to do is create different failures in that African continent in 20 different countries. They wanted to offer a technological pack of poison, of fertilizers, of mechanization, and that was the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. Bill and Melinda were like the messiah, but so that you can have an idea, inequality grew in Africa. And that $1 billion was only able to, at some point, manage to create a slight increase in the production of corn by 30%. In other crops, they manage 15%, but with agroecology, we can create more gains. And we don't only have the harvest, but we're also harvesting and looking after the land with our method. So I would say that if you want to completely destroy people's health, all you have to do is destroy the health of the soil. And that is the root of the development that is being imposed on us, destroying human health, destroying the soil health. The strategy of destroying the soil health is also automatically destroying human health. So these are the ideas I'd like to share, and global warming is a result of this technological development and the consumption that is imposed with it. If we don't look after the soil, it's irreversible because of the maniacal behavior of some individuals in some colonial countries who want to continue to dominate and want to continue to have more and more. If we don't change this focus, this idea that we really need a different vision, we need a different focus. It's the determining moment. In 50 years, it's been able to stimulate and enable the conditions to extinguish more than 50% of the native species in the land. In the last 50 years, agro-industry has been able to stimulate and permit the conditions to extinguish more than 50% of the local species on the planet. And I would say that the motto of all of this development is to swallow oneself up, to suffer just consuming CO2. And this is really the flagship of capitalism. And this will be the epitaph on the tomb of capitalism. and those who promote death will also die.
This would be the speech. We also need proposals. If time allows it now, we could speak for longer, talking about more than 100 tools and basic strategies in order to promote another type of agriculture with more humane goals, in order to create a fairer society, healthier society that respects other species and the environment that allows for our existence. As we do not have the time to get into detail, I understand we don't have the time because this is a conference, it's not a specific technological proposal. In order to finish up, I would like to announce in a very brief way, I would like to present a couple of principles and a series of goals that have to be taken into account so that a different kind of agriculture is possible. There's one basic principle: defending life and the environment comprehensively, defending it from any risk that could imply any kind of agrarian activity. Second basic principle: the soil, as well as all agricultural production, must be understood as a living tissue. Everything is a living tissue. We have to take into account that the traditional knowledge of peasants is very important, as important as academic knowledge. The academic world is not above traditional learning. Another goal is developing technologies that are adapted to social-cultural and economic and cultural situations of the different regions. Based on a reality and in a non-consumistic way, we must eradicate the use of poisons and practices that produce food that put the health of the workers of the fields at risk, and also the health of the consumers at risk. The healthy production that's produced with ecological agriculture is the strongest weapon against the unhealthy practices of drug companies. This is the most powerful weapon against illness that is induced by agro-industry and pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies prepare people for illness. We must also redistribute the land in a solidarity way. The land has to be redistributed. The land must be decolonized. We must reduce the size of the land. We must give more land to the peasants. We must give them access to quality land. That's a very important problem. Sometimes peasants are given land, but the quality of this land is really bad. We must take this quality into account, because sometimes governments try to give land to the peasants, but they give them the worst possible lands to the farmers, to the peasants that are the ones that need them the most. We must have really clear established policies. We must be able to produce cheap, affordable food. Food must not be elitist. That is fascism. Food must be for all the population. It must be nutritious. Everybody should be able to eat healthy food. There should be no economic selection. We must understand and work the productive units according to the climatic situation. Sometimes they want to impose technologies that are not the best for the climate, for the water availability, for the local economy, and so on. We also have to look for the efficient size of the land in order to reach inner happiness. We must find look for a diverse and efficient size. The size of the land is not the most important thing. We must increase the size of the heart. We must listen to the feelings and not only think of economy and on being predators. The Green Revolution implied mechanization, chemical fertilizers, poison, poverty, displacement, deaths. It considered the land as one input more. The Green Revolution did not consider the land a living organism, vegetables as food that had to be produced healthy, and it did not consider the peasants and the workers of the lands and their families as the people who build a wealth that they should not pay for with their health and the sacrifice of their dignity and happiness. The peasants are the ones that build this wealth, but they must not compromise the happiness and the health so that other people survive. In this conference, in this presentation about soul and the diet, this is something that is mentioned in the title of this presentation. I would like to say something about this. An ill soil is the one that produces a deficient diet, which is not something that can provide health and a strong soul to people. Industrial agriculture kills the soul, defortifies, weakens the soul. This is a body without a soul produces death, and the food that is produced industrially don't have a soul. They have something different. Everything that's produced with no feelings affects the people who consume it. This food affects the soul and the spirit of people. Finally, I would like to thank my friend Matt from England. We have become brothers. We have become partners in this struggle, in a friendship. We've known each other for 7 years. I would like to thank him for this opportunity. I would like to thank the colleagues that have made this conference possible. I would like to thank the team that is supporting us right now, thanks to the interpreters. I would like to tell you, finally, that everything that lives inside the human being, it lived in the soil. Everything that lives inside the human being one day lived inside the soil, under the ground. If the soil is empty, all the dwellers that move on the ground will have this emptiness inside. I hope that we fight for agriculture that fills the souls of the human beings by respecting the inside and the living content of the soil. Thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to wish you every success with this conference. Thank you to the team, and I hope that I can meet you physically sometime soon. I hope that I meet you in other conferences or whenever you want. I am at your disposal, and we can become brothers, and we can continue not only fighting for agriculture, but in this struggle for life, a life that respects life. We are not life, we are an extension of life. Regardless of life will go on, even if the human being does not exist. Let's not forget this, life will go on. Bacteria, viruses, they are older than life on Earth. Life and death are older and more ancient than the life on Earth. We must respect the viruses, the microbiology. They came here to start alive in this planet. Life and death are older than the Earth. I would like to thank you deeply for your cooperation. I would like to hug you all. I am at your disposal for any questions you may want to ask. I wanted to be very brief and concise in this conference. I'm not used to speaking to a cold screen, to a square screen, but I'm doing my best to convey this message. The most important thing is not technology. The most important thing is being opening ourselves to feeling and to enjoying life. If you do not enjoy life, you're distracted by technology. Thank you very much. I'm at your disposal for your questions.
Thank you, Jairo. You always speak with passion, and it's what we need now to motivate us. And my job now is to encourage questions. So people who have questions from the talk, please put them in the chat box, and I will try and put them to Jairo. We've got another 25 minutes of time, so we've got some good time to take questions and try and get more of a discussion going. So I've got one that's just come in. Could you please expand a bit on the connections between soil health, environmental health, and human health? How are these healths related? And how do we work to build them?
Yo tengo una manera muy rara de responder.
I have a very weird way of responding. Sometimes I'm very dense in my responses. The only one thing I want to say is that there's no life that is separated from the earth, from the ground. Every life is connected to minerals. Minerals are alive. We are directly connected to the living minerals. There's no life separated from the soil, from the ground. And that is the most direct way I have to understand health. When we were born, we were connected to health. We were connected to nature. Nature gave us health. The human being destroyed health and transformed it into a commodity, into something it could sell. That is a disgrace, the way this was manipulated. I'm writing something. Well, agricultural engineers do not know the history before agriculture. There is this history before agriculture. The history of the human being did not start in the Neolithical era. The basis of agriculture is 100,000 years, 11,000 years ago. We must think about what nature was like in the Paleolithic era. We are distracted. I always recommend people, so that they understand this sensitivity of biology and this connection. I recommend the reading of Lee Margulis. He's a fantastic author because he takes you on a journey where life is rescued. For me, the most important thing is to rescue the integrity of life. There's no integral life if there's no environment. Life and the environment are not separated. It's difficult to identify where the life and the environment start. They are intertwined. The more related things are, more healthy we are, healthier we are.
Okay. So I've got much more of a practical question here. Jairo, can you give examples of ecological agriculture from Colombia or other communities? Just describe a bit of those examples.
Sí, tenemos. En el mundo existen más de 350.
Yes, we have more than 350 million experiences from different farmers. More than great proportion of the coffee in Colombia is a coffee that is totally friendly with the environment, but it's not acknowledged. There are endless experiences in Colombia. There's indigenous communities that live completely out of the system of subsidies, and we have examples of herding, of organic farming, animal breeding. There's a colleague that has 26 experiences in different departments with environmental animal breeding. 20,000 peasant families in Colombia depend on the traditional craft way of producing sugar. We have 2 million hectares of organic agriculture. Uruguay, Argentina, Isla Verde in Uruguay is a good example of organic agriculture. In Uruguay, we have experiences of more than 3,000 hectares of organic agriculture with farms that have chickens also that are organic in Cordoba, Argentina. In Patagonia, we have also a good example. In Ecuador, we have farms with more than 1,200 hectares of organic production. Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Salvador. There's lots of different examples. Many times they are not acknowledged because the mafia of the certification, because the certifiers are a mafia and it is corrupt. Even though they are not certified, they are also ecologic. There's a clandestine organic agriculture, and that is the best. Best agriculture is the clandestine agriculture, the one that's not related to the subsidies of the state and that are not controlled by the mafia of certifiers.
Okay, no mincing of words there. So again, so this is a more wide open question. Thanks for this amazing talk, Jairo. Could you share your thoughts on how to enable an agricultural shift? How can we convince conventional producers to change?
A los productores no hay que convencerlos.
We do not need to convince them. We are the ones, the consumers, that are responsible for being allies of a completely different political model. The peasants have never been the ones to blame. Peasants must not be changed. They must be respected. They have always known how to work. We must change our consumption approach to consumption. We must implement civil disobedience as consumers. There are some things that some ideas I have. We must reduce the speed of consumption that has been imposed. Secondly, as citizens, we must be rebel and we must divorce ourselves from the banking system. Banks are criminals. What we have to do as consumers is eliminate the contact with the banking system, diminish the consumption, making partnerships of consumptions and markets and producers, getting out of the community we are. Mr. Consumer, your food is below the cement. We must give less and less money to the big supermarkets. We must get out of the community as consumers and look for partnerships between the producers and the consumers. Otherwise, this is going to reach an end. We need partnerships. We need to raise awareness in the consumers. The consumer must be focused on the fact that peasants are not storages of frozen food. A peasant is not a supermarket. A peasant is a cultural unit that must be respected. We must change our approach as consumers. If we change our own approach as consumer, the production approach will change absolutely. We must give an example as consumers. And if we change as consumers, the policies and the fields will change.
Great. Okay, and we have one question here. Erosion from upstream in river systems often creates and maintains fertility on floodplains and in estuaries. Can you comment on good and bad nutrient flows in river systems?
Hay una cosa que es bien interesante con relación al agua.
There's something very interesting when we're talking about water. We don't have fresh water in the world. We have water that has been given by the sea to the planet. It's a false concept. Fresh water doesn't exist. All water belongs to the sea, all of it. What happens is that there is part of the water that comes to pacify the land, and that is different. And there's something very important here. With regard to this water, only 0.3% of the total volume of water is available. Because based on that false percent of 0.3% of fresh water, a large part of that is frozen. So we can't count on it, but now it is melting, so well. But what worries me the most about water is that 25% of water, which is incorrectly called fresh water, 25% is polluted by the agro-industrial synthesis process, by the inputs, by the fertilizers, the treatments, the toxic substances. They've not even gone out onto the market, but they've already compromised 25% of the water that we have on the planet. So this contamination then continues after the application of these toxic substances. What contaminates water the most, because we don't have life without water, the greatest desperation of all of this is to look for humidity, because without that humidity, without water, life isn't possible. And so that life is contaminated to the extent that water is contaminated. So with this contamination of upstream waters, if we don't have this line of water, really what we have actually is a spiral of water. Water is it's the same water. We don't have a water cycle. The routes they take, and life isn't a cycle, it's not a network, there's no equilibrium. That's a colonial thought. The root is stronger. The root isn't a pyramid, it transcends the pre-established figures. The roots are spirals, and spirals lead us to infinity. And infinity doesn't belong to the human species. That infinity will continue, and in that infinity we will have a story to tell and a species that will disappear, and that will be human beings. So without water, we have no life, and the quality of that life depends on that water. Water is constantly physically and biologically transforming, and the enemy here is the agro-industry. Before that, we also have the chemical production being implemented here. More than 70% of the water on the land is contaminated by the livestock and agricultural sector on the planet.
And one more question coming from Thomas, who says, I've been working through your book, The ABC of Organic Agriculture, and simultaneously working through the work and recommendations of the agronomist John Kempf, based in the US. I notice lots of overlap and was wondering if you'd ever work together and what you think of their practical recommendations and how it compares to your own.
No, no lo conozco.
No, I don't know that author. I've just found out about John Kempf, but I would like to know more about what he has written. I don't know him, but it's great that you have found that. Protecting life is a universal concept. When you have this universal concept of protecting life, everything that is written down, it all coincides. So there's no need for us to know each other. What is necessary is to feel life, and that is where we begin to coincide. And we might coincide on our principles, but because we write with principles. And when we write with these principles, then in the end, we do tend to overlap. There's a meeting point in terms of our thoughts on the subject. Regarding the question beforehand on water, I'm going to give you an example about water. At the moment, I'm calculating production of hens and eggs so that you have an idea on an industrial scale. To produce one egg per day, agro-industry consumes 100 to 150 liters of water to produce one egg. Agro-industry consumes from 100 to 135 liters of water per egg. Agro-industry consumes more than 30 liters of water per hen, and I am consuming 200 milliliters of water per hen per egg. Just 200 milliliters. One hen in one day doesn't consume more than 200 milliliters of water. When you give this hen fresh pasture, the consumption of water reduces. So my hens are actually just consuming 100 milliliters per day, just to give you an idea. And an apple produced chemically, just one apple, so you have an idea, produced chemically needs approximately, on an agro-industrial scale, it needs 70 liters of water for just one apple. Grown organically, that apple can be produced with less than 10 liters of water using biofertilization and soil coverage. These are ideas that can be offered. 1 cup of milk consumes approximately 200 liters of water in the industrial system. One peasant to produce 1 liter of water consumes less than 20 liters of water. Agro-industry consumes 200 liters of water, so a tenth of what agro-industry consumes. We're talking about a huge economy, huge saving. I don't know if there are any more questions.
There are a few. I'm just wondering whether, Jairo, you have produced a book recently, and I'm going to put a photograph of it up on the screen. And maybe you could just talk about why you wrote the book and some of the content of the book. There's one question about how do we learn more about you? How do we connect with you? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share the photograph of the book, and then I'm going to put up the web address of Jairo's center in Colombia, and also a web address of Ragman's Lane Farm, where you can buy the English previous edition of a previous book. Okay, so sharing screen. So this is a copy of the book.
Sí, este libro.
Go.
Sí, este libro, Mierda a la Carta. O sea, esto es.
This book, Mierda a la Carta, is the idea behind it is to offer a menu like you would see in a restaurant. You can either take what is there or you can reinvent it. That's the advantage of this book. This book, in reality, is just an organization of ideas, of practical experiences with peasants. So, in reality, this book is a collection of recipes, of ideas, and the book at each pass stimulates you to redesign and to reinvent. The book is a starting point. I'm giving an example of a chef. A chef is someone who can make good meals with the ingredients that they have, and with the same ingredients they can make different meals. And that's what this book is about. The book offers inspiration for creativity, for reformulation, and for doing away with other factors. And it does have ideas for recipes, but the best thing about this book is that it has been filtering through the recipes that can work in different collectives. It is a collection, it's a book that always ends up creating new things because new formulas keep coming up. It's constantly changing. And so that is also what the book is about. And that is why I wrote it, because I thought it was necessary. Many people were asking me for recipes and formulas, and I was just so full of different ideas. And so I wrote the book. It has some 260 recipes, and it's not a book for reading, it's really for understanding. And only those who really carry this work out practically will understand it. You won't understand it until you really carry it out and implement it. Only those who work practically can understand it. This is the difference that I have with the academic world, and that is to speak with passion. And when you speak with passion, it's because you have implemented different actions.
So another question coming in, which is, where do you see the real development of scientific endeavor? At what level do you see scientific endeavor really aiding the fight for organic farming?
Indiscutiblemente ya está planificado.
Without a doubt, it's already planned. It's calculated that from 2050, it has been calculated that we will have to double the production of food according to the data of the MAFIA, that is the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. I'm talking about the latest document they brought out on sustainable agriculture. And in any way, it does actually recommend pesticides. So the day that hunger ends, the Food and Agriculture Organization will disappear. It's an organization, it's a prostitution organization. It really survives because it talks about ending hunger. But actually what we have to do is eradicate hunger. And that can be done when the Food and Agriculture Organization really stops doing business. So what does exist is a projection that the only two continents that are able to have the area of land to double food are Africa and Latin America. All other continents will have completely depleted the conditions for a different kind of agriculture, a healthy agriculture that will enable us to double the production of food. These are conventional calculations, but I would say that if these calculations were in organic agriculture were these, then we would actually not just be able to double the food production, we would be able to quadruple it because the capacity is enormous. One cow can offer 200 liters of oil. They can produce biofuel. They can produce 200 tons of biofuel in 1 year. So the calculations that the Food and Agricultural Organization offers, these are conventional ones, but if we look at the organic farming focus, we would not only be able to double the food production, we'd be able to quadruple it. So these projections aren't really taken into consideration with FAO's negotiations. They make calculations based on conventional agro-industry. So without a doubt, organic agriculture can only be possible, and it is possible, in Latin America and in Africa. Now the focus is on Africa, because that is where the largest regions are, and in quotation marks, there is huge state corruption there in Africa. There is a greater penetration there, and in Latin America, we've seen a reduction of that. But Africa is the new focal point. And there, I'm going to mention something here, and very few have this analysis. 4 people, 4 institutions have represented Africa with a global power. One Black president in the United States of Kenyan origin, one representative of the WTO, African, one representative of the United Nations with a Nobel Prize, and one Black representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization. That was the strategy of Bill Gates with Obama, to have 4 Black men in power, in these positions of power, to give the image, this image, and to go to Africa with this global strategy. 4 Africans in these global positions of power, 2 Nobel Prize winners, and 2 more Black men working in these positions of power. This was a global strategy. Nobody could imagine what having these 4 representatives meant. So this kind of cleans the image, this global image of these four Black men. Africa, the hopes of Africa are increased with this, and these subtly got into this. This race was used as a mechanism of the power. 2 Nobel Prizes, one after the other, one president of the United States, one director of the United Nations who was also Black, but all of them living outside of Africa. None of them lived in Africa, and they were giving different directives and guidelines for Africa, and they were working with Bill Gates and all of this. So we can't talk about geopolitics, we can talk about racial politics. Race and the image of the Black man is another way of using the Black color and Black people is another way of making Africa feel like it is the all-powerful in the world. But the World Bank launched its global strategy in very criminal circumstances using race. So Africa and Latin America are the only countries that have the real spaces that can be used for organic agriculture and that can be reconverted, because they still have huge populations in the rural areas.
Jairo, we're running out of time, and I'm really sorry to cut you off, because I can see you're just getting warmed up. But we have to finish on the top of the hour. And I just want to thank you very much. I'm really hoping that you put some fire in people's bellies, because that's what we need now. And it's been really, really fascinating to hear you talk. Thank you very, very much. There's lots of fantastic comments coming in about how people have enjoyed the talk. So thank you everybody for listening. I hope it's been enjoyable, and check out the links in the chat box if you want to learn more about Jairo, or the book that he's got in English is also available from the Raglan site as well. Thank you very much, Jairo, and thank you everybody for listening.
Muchas gracias.